She said, "So what is the goal of nursing?" I said, "The goal of nursing is to promote patient adaptation. The nursing shortage can really be helped by two things. People need nursing, and they need prepared nurses. Both illness and wellness go together."
Hi, Sister Callista Roy. It's so nice to have you in my channel.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here for the Korean nursing community. I have a lot of questions to ask you and discuss with you. I'm very excited.
I think it's wonderful that you use this media to keep teaching nurses and to bring in the community of Korean nurses in many ways.
How have you been after your retirement from the Mount St. Mary's University in 2020? You received your Bachelor of Arts in Nursing, so it was a full loop.
Yes, that's right. I started here. Actually, being retired has been wonderful. It was a good idea. It gives me the opportunity to pick and choose what I think is important to do, to save my energy for when it would be most useful to others. I have a very simple response. Like if people want me to do a keynote for their conference or something, and it's not something I need to do. It's something I've done plenty of, and there are videos out there, etc. It's okay to say, "Thank you for your interest in my work. I'm retired and no longer accepting such commitments. I wish you well for your conference," or whatever. But on the other hand, I can also say, like, for example, St. Joseph Hospital in Lewiston, Idaho, asked me to come, and Nurses Week, they had a wonderful theme this year. It was like, nurses are important. It was very good. I went and I did 3 presentations on Nurses Day. They had me at 9, 11, and 6. And believe it or not, 6 was the busiest. In response to your question, retirement gives me the chance to pick and choose and to use my time where I think it will be extremely useful.
I want to go back to your initial stage when you started nursing. How was your journey developing your Roy adaptation model in 1976?
Actually, the first publication came out in 1970. But the way it began was my community brought me back to Los Angeles to get a master's degree. I had my baccalaureate. I worked at our hospital in St. Mary's in Tucson, Arizona. I was in pediatrics. It was great because the census goes up and down, and they floated me because I was young. I was able to work every unit of the hospital, so I had great experience. I was in the emergency room, the operating room, anywhere, medical and surgical. So I had really good clinical experience, but they asked me to get my master's. So I was at UCLA, and I was very fortunate because my teacher was Dorothy Johnson, who had a great thinker about nursing. Nursing was at that time moving into baccalaureate education. And she said, to do that, we have to clearly know what our goal of nursing is and develop our old knowledge base. Well, I had read one paragraph in an article in a book, and it talked about adaptation. I said, that's what nursing is all about. She said, "So what is the goal of nursing?" I said, "The goal of nursing is to promote patient adaptation." She said, "And what do you mean by that?" So I got to spend my whole rest of my professional career describing what I mean by that. When I came out of the master's program, I had 2 publishable papers, actually. And then 1970 becomes very important. That's when the first article came out in Nursing Outlook. That's when the curriculum started at Mount St. Mary's. We could talk more about that in a minute. I had the first request for consultation as soon as the article came out, as other schools began to adopt the model. That's how the very beginning.
When I was looking at your previous interview with the Clayton State University in 2015, you mentioned how there is ongoing effort into developing the model in 2015. And you mentioned the world that is changing. We live in this world that is constantly changing. Our environment changes, our stimuli change, how we see ourselves change. How has your approach to your adaptation model changed over time in this constantly evolving world?
That's a very good question. I would say that I was fortunate in the way I developed the model because it allows for change. In other words, what is the most important, both on an individual level, nurse and patient, and then on all the way up to the global level, what is the most important focal stimuli, the thing immediately that everybody's having to deal with? And of course, the pandemic was a huge change for the whole world. I should add that how the model developed, I was thinking of adaptation. I had to figure out, another nurse was developing some similar ideas, but in the end, she called it conservation. So it didn't get mixed up. That's why I added Roy to the first of it, was because of distinguishing it from Levine's work. But in any case, they didn't get mixed up because I had to describe what I meant by adaptation. I just went to Mount St. Mary's card catalog in the library. I looked up a adaptation. Strangely enough, a book had just come out, Adaptation Level Theory. Now, Helson was a physiological psychologist, so only one chapter related to people and individuals, but I realized that it was extremely useful the way he looked at it, because he said, like, if you're lifting lead weights, you lift up this one, how heavy you say it is also depends on the one you lifted up just before it. So it was focal, contextual. He said they always come out slightly different, so you don't know everything about the person too. So I called that focal, contextual, residual. In other words, the model, and I got that framework from Helson's book, but it's extremely useful for nursing. I thought, oh my goodness, yes, of course. The patient may be dealing right now with an exposure to COVID, but they may also have a really important job that they don't want to miss. There's a context in which it occurs. It's because they believe in themselves as a person who would never miss work. Everything we face has this combination. Therefore, it's extremely useful for nurses in understanding people. And that's what it's all about, whether it's health or illness, finding ways to be sure you get your vaccinations, prevent illness, or whether it's taking care of people. You know, I've noticed that in the pandemic, we always knew nursing was important, but now more people know that because they've seen nurses. They see them giving the prevention, and then our ICUs have been full of really sick people for a long time. About 1/3 of the healthcare personnel who died from COVID were nurses. They've given their all. They really have. The model allows for change, and looking at the current situation, because of setting it up with the focal, contextual, residual stimuli, as well as the person, people have said the Roy model was helpful because it was the easiest to use in practice. Well, that's because it came from practice. I had the nursing students at Mount St. Mary's have little slips of paper when the patient needed a nurse, what was going on. They wrote it down, and they were color coded for the clinical. So med surg was blue and OB was pink. I had 500 samples of patient behavior. We call that content analysis today. I just plain was sorting them as best I could, and I got the physiological, and then what people are affected as people. So that was another category, self-concept. It also affects things they do with other people, their roles, but it affects mostly the people they're closest to, interdependent. So that's how I came up with the four. The model then started out using patient samples. Those are things that they're relevant today. They haven't changed. If you're talking about roles, well, women's roles have changed immensely, but it's still their roles. You still can analyze it with the same broad categories. And the changes going on have to do with the changes going on in the world. So how do you describe them? As I said, the model allows for describing the world as it is from day to day, today or tomorrow or next year.
It's mesmerizing for me that your model is everlasting and it's still very applicable. And as you mentioned, it came from practice. That's why.
Right.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about your thought on nursing workforce. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 6% of registered nursing workforce is expected to grow by 2031, with more than 200,000 RN openings annually. What do you see the current and forecasted nursing shortage have an impact on the adaptability of nurses and in society?
The nursing shortage really does impact society, I think, because people need nursing and they need prepared nurses. They need nurses who understand people and they're dealing with health and illness. It's like our country in general has not done a good job with healthcare. Finally, we got a little better coverage, but we're the one developed country in the world that doesn't have a federalized system. In other words, that everybody gets healthcare and it doesn't matter who you are. I think the leadership of nursing needs to take a strong position, say we need a federalized system. What are the barriers? Partly it's that people don't understand. Why is it that we still have women dying in childbirth is tremendously determined by your ethnic group? That absolutely should not be. Everybody should have this, the care they need to have healthy mothers and babies. The Roy model, looking at the nursing shortage, needs to be more public, whether they do videos, whether they do yourself, you have a blog. I think we have to put them out there where people see them, what nursing can do, show how important the contribution is, maybe get down lower and lower into grade schools where people begin to think that this is an important profession to join, so we can lower that need for nurses. Now, more men are going into nursing, which is great. I think that helps. I think that is adding. I'm very happy at Mount St. Mary's. It's the one discipline that men can go into, and they do, because that's the way the rest of society is too. Often they go faster up the ladder into leadership positions. The nursing shortage can really be helped by two things. One, people understanding what the discipline has to offer and encouraging young people, including men, to go into it.
Right. That's why spreading the world and listening to you speak and talking about what nursing offers is so important.
Yes.
Your model is epitome of looking at a human being and nursing in a holistic point of view. I think you touched on it briefly while we were talking about nursing shortage. What opportunities and barriers do you see for developing holistic nursing for the future generation of nurses?
As with any social change, it requires knowledge, really understanding it. It has to be in a way that's made available to people. What kinds of channels do we use? For example, Nurses Week would be a good time to raise the money and put out short videos as advertisements. We still use television ads, and fortunately, whatever public media people are using, we've got to follow that and have the kind of knowledge. People have to know what it is that nurses do, and it's really important to make this available to people.
From your 50 years of teaching, what do you find the most effective when teaching patients and other nurses?
Well, the most important thing is experience, but they have to think through their experience. For nursing teachers, for faculty, that post-conference is just hugely important, because I was doing student teaching actually at the time, and I had this one student who couldn't tell me anything about her patient. I was trying to figure out what the problem was. She was so nervous. She never got across the threshold. She hadn't got in the room yet. So my point is, you've got to know what's going on and experiences. And then they talk about it afterwards. So they understand, oh, this patient, when I did this, they responded in this way. Well, then what was going on? That's why the model was successful, because people found that a useful way to try to describe the person. Well, what was happening to them physiologically? Had they not slept all night? As I said, it's knowledge, it's understanding. We have to find ways to make knowledge about nursing available to people.
I was reading about your childhood, getting to the development of your adaptation model. Your second eldest in 14 children. And you talked
Right.
about your mother, who was very resourceful and very adaptable. Do you think your childhood and growing up, having family in the crux of your life was helpful creating this theory?
Yes, definitely. I think because my parents, they understood not only about raising their own children, but about giving to others. Both of them were very conscious of social needs and responding to others. We didn't have a lot ourselves, but we would always help others that were in need. And my mother, in spite of, she has all these children, she helps found the first licensed vocational nurses association in California. My point is, she knew how to get things done. And that, of course, definitely affected me. There's no way I'd be sitting around waiting for somebody else to do it, because I saw how much they could do. Yeah.
For sure. I wanted to understand how you thought adaptability when you were growing up. So that makes sense. In your life, what is a failure that you had that turned into a gift?
Oh, that's a great question. I like that. It's an important one in terms of the growth of the model. What it was because I had just come from my master's program, had all these wonderful ideas, wrote these papers. I came to my first faculty meeting at Mount St. Mary's, and there were 14 faculty, 12 of whom had taught me as an undergraduate just a few years before. Okay. So they're saying, we really want to develop a curriculum not so medically based. We've got to make it more nursing based. I immediately say, well, I have this idea about adaptation. Okay, so I'm telling them all about it. They couldn't care less. What did I know? Nothing. That was the end of that. But a strange thing happened at the end of my first year of teaching. I got very sick. I had a dizziness that 12 years later, they didn't have neuroimaging at the time, but there was a tumor on my balance nerve.
Oh, wow.
And that's why I'm gone for a whole year. The neurologist said, because we can't find anything, it's probably viral. So let's just teach her to get on her feet and continue. I remember just grasping the podium to stand up to teach. But I did. I went back to work. Okay, we're talking about something bad that turned into good. So then the faculty say to me, now, what were you saying a year ago about adaptation? Because we've been spinning our wheels a whole year. We've got nothing done. They made me chair the committee to rewrite the philosophy and then to develop the curriculum. Now, I also have to say, what has been important to me, too, is mentors. And Sister Rebecca Doan, who had founded the department, was the chair. She knew I had good ideas, and she gave me the time to work on it. That was when my first effort to bring it forward was not useful at all, but it turned into the basis when I brought it back.
Where do you think your motivation and this passion comes from?
It's who I am. It's probably in my genes. But yes, it's from family, from my community. And I have always loved and appreciated nursing. In fact, I remember somebody saying, you're interested in medicine. No, I'm not. Doctors deal with disease. I deal with people. It's a combination of things, from helping care for my family and my parents, then the great, great mentors I had in nursing.
Because I hear this energy when you speak now. And this is great. I love this. Since I am passionate about education and what we need to work on for the next generation of nurses, what is it that you learn over the years that can be very important to tackle for the nurses who are working in practice?
The important thing is to understand that both illness and wellness go together. that even if you have a person who has a chronic condition, that helping them take care of it will help them lead their best life. So it's the idea of bringing each person to the level of their total self as best you can. So in other words, I come from a family that has diabetes. One of my sisters was diagnosed at age 4, and I had a brother diagnosed when he was a young teen, but I had one who was diagnosed when she was in her 50s. The idea is that health and illness are related, and that a diabetic living a healthy life is hugely important. By the same token, someone from a family who doesn't have it, it's also important. Having people live their lives as much wellness as they can, have a happy life themselves, and a contributor to society. I think the importance of seeing health and illness as interrelated, and the idea of each person being at their highest level of wellness.
I'm a medical surgical nurse, and when I take care of my patients, I sometimes forget about the goal of nursing. When you mentioned that the goal of nursing is to promote adaptability of patients, that really made me think more about a person in different facets to promote the best for themselves. So thank you for sharing that. What do you like the most about being the internationally renowned nurse theorist, scientist, writer, and a teacher?
First of all, I consider it all as gift. I was given so much. It is a great gift to have the opportunity to be able to share what I think is so important. Nursing. I will say it here because, I have been in 27 different countries. That is a huge gift to me. I try to go a day early and ask them to share with me their most important cultural gifts, etc. I meet the best people in the world because I meet nurses. The gift for me to be a person who's invited to visit all these places and to value and respect all these different cultures and the changes and the differences. Nurses are the most wonderful people because they are the ones who give their total selves. That has been a gift to me.
Right. And the culture is also one of the factors to affect adaptability. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to mention today?
I have to tell the story that I've told before, but it has to do with providence. I give great credit to God guiding my life, which I call providence. And so one time, many years ago, I was supposed to write an introduction to the reissuing of Florence Nightingale's book, Notes on Nursing, for the 100th anniversary of Lippincott. In this little introduction, I had a short little thing, and I said something about providence. The young copy editor, so that's the guy who's checking all the periods and commas just before it goes to press, he says, oh, wait a minute. He goes to the chief editor and says, shouldn't this say Rhode Island? And he said, no. He knew me very well from all the books. And he said, no, she means God.
Oh my gosh. So that's great.
I would be remiss if I did not mention how important the guidance of God in my life is. Thank you.
I just want to add this at the end. Thank you again for being here for the Korean nursing community. And in your previous interview, I heard you say, and I love this, the best achievement is yet to come. And I really wish that anyone who listened to you speak today realize that it can be them and their work that can be the best achievement. Thank you.
My pleasure. All the best to the nurses, all nurses, and particularly nurses with a Korean heritage or contributing in Korea.